morning, students. We have started Fundamental Unit of Life chapter. In that, we have learned about some discoveries. Why cell is called fundamental unit of life, and what is cell theory, how cell shape decides the function, or how function is correlated with the cell shape and size, all those things. And we have started discussing what cell is made of, or structural organization of cell. Every cell is made of three components. They are plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. Plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. These three are the structural components of all cells. And let us learn individually about what is plasma membrane, what is cytoplasm, and what is nucleus. Plasma membrane is the outermost covering membrane. Outermost covering membrane. Plasma membrane is the outermost covering membrane. It separates the inner cellular contents from its external environment. Separates the inner cellular contents from external environment. Right? It separates the inner cellular contents from external environment. Next. It permits some molecules to move across it, and it prevents other materials to move across it. It permits only some molecules to move across it or to move through it. Only some. Means it is able to permit. Able to permit only some. As plasma membrane is able to permit only some molecules, as plasma membrane is able to permit only some molecules, it is called semi-permeable membrane. Semi-permeable membrane. Why Why plasma membrane is called semi-permeable membrane? Because it is able to permit only some molecules to move across it. To move across it. And it prevents other materials. It prevents other materials in a selective manner. In a selective manner. Plasma membrane permits only some molecules to move across it, and it prevents other materials to move across it. To move across it. So, as it is permitting and preventing, as it is permitting some molecules to move across it and preventing other materials to move across it in a selective manner. In a selective manner, it is called selectively permeable membrane. Selectively permeable membrane. So, plasma membrane is called semi-permeable membrane as well as selectively permeable membrane. Why is it called semi-permeable membrane? As it is able to permit only some molecules to move across it. And why plasma membrane is called selectively permeable membrane? Because it permits and prevents only some molecules to move across it in a selective manner. It is called selectively permeable membrane. Next. How does the movement of substances take into the cell? How does the movement of substances take place into the cell or out of the cell? Out of the cell. How does the movement of substances take place into the cell or out of the cell? Right. Actually, as you are studying only class 9th, I cannot explain in-depth details, but little connected things I have to explain. The cellular transport, movement of substances in and out of the cell is called cellular transport. Cellular transport basically takes place in two ways: active and passive transport. Active transport means either into the cell or from the cell to the outside. Either into the cell from outside or from the cell to outside. If any material is transported, getting transported by the expenditure of energy, that is known as active transport. Passive transport means the movement of materials across the cell membrane, means into the cell and from the cell to outside the cell. If movement of substances is taking place without any expenditure of energy, that is called passive transport. So we are not going to discuss so much about the active transport here, or complete details of passive transport also, which you will learn in class 11th. Right. Then what are we going to learn regarding the cellular transport? we are going to learn about diffusion and osmosis little in detail. What is diffusion? Diffusion is movement of a substance or material from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. Diffusion is the movement of substances or materials from the region of their higher concentration to the region of their lower concentration spontaneously. Spontaneously means without spending any energy. That is called diffusion. So here diffusion is one of the means of cellular transport. Simply what you can write, spontaneous movement of substances. Spontaneous movement of substances from the region of their higher concentration. From the region of their higher concentration to the region of their lower concentration. So, which substances generally used to get transported by diffusion? The respiratory gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen. These gases generally they used to get transported by what? Diffusion. And this diffusion is simply called gaseous diffusion, not any other thing. Right? And how does diffusion play an important role in gaseous exchange? How does the diffusion play an important role? How does the diffusion play an important role in gaseous exchange? In our body cells, continuously cellular respiration takes place. By means of cellular respiration, some waste materials are produced. Among them, CO2 is one of the chief waste material. This CO2 gets accumulated. When CO2 gets accumulated in the cell, obviously its concentration is increased. The CO2 concentration is increased than from the external environment of the cell. If it is the cell and this is the external environment. So by continuous cellular respiration, CO2 concentration it is increased inside the cell, and outside the cell, that is from the external environment of the cell, the CO2 concentration it remains same. But as it is increasing, obviously, in a comparative manner, you can say that the concentration of CO2 is high inside the cell and it is low in the external environment of the cell. So, obviously, from where to where this CO2 will move from inside the cell to outside the cell. The CO2 will move. So here, By means of diffusion only CO2 is expelled out from the cell. If it is getting accumulated, it is going to cause harm to the cell. Right. And the oxygen in the external environment, it remains in the same concentration. Assume that. Whereas the oxygen inside the cell, it will be keep getting utilized for cellular respiration. So its concentration keeps getting reduced. The concentration of oxygen keeps getting reduced. When the concentration of oxygen inside the cell keeps getting reduced, obviously the external environment in a comparative level, it is going to have higher concentration of oxygen. So oxygen moves in. In this way, by means of diffusion, the CO2 is expelled out from the cell and the oxygen will enter inside the cell. Right? So the diffusion plays a crucial role in gases exchange of the cell. Right? Now, coming to, so we have discussed about gases. So what about water? Does water obey the law of diffusion or not? What is the law of diffusion? Movement of substances from the region of their higher concentration to the region of their lower concentration is known as law of diffusion or simply diffusion. So, does water obey the law of diffusion? Yes, water obeys the law of diffusion. But unlike the diffusion of gases, the diffusion of water is given a special term that is called osmosis. Osmosis. What is osmosis? What is diffusion? Movement of substances from the region of their higher concentration to the region of their lower concentration. And what is osmosis? Diffusion of water, simply we have said. So what is, just club both diffusion of diffusion. Okay, so here movement of water from the region of their higher, from the region of its higher concentration. Movement of water from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. To the region of its lower concentration. This is osmosis. Right? Through what? Through selectively permeable membrane. Movement of water from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration through selectively permeable membrane or through plasma membrane, simply. Through plasma membrane. Right. Okay. So, osmosis, it can be affected by the amount of substance that is dissolved in water. Osmosis is affected by the amount of dissolved substance in it. Dissolved substance means solute. In terms of your chemistry line, chemistry terms, the dissolved substance is also called solute. So, if the amount of dissolved substance is increased comparatively per a unit area, the free water concentration will be reduced. So, water concentration means free water concentration here. Okay. So, if the amount of solute is increasing, the amount of free water concentration is decreasing per a given unit area. Right. Okay. So, So if you take a plant cell or animal cell, if you are placing it in a medium of liquid, that liquid is going to have some amount of water concentration. What will be its fate? And how many types of media are there based on the water concentration in comparison with the water concentration of the cell? The types of media with respect to the water concentration in comparison with the water concentration of the cell. Right. There are three types of media. Three types of media. They are hypotonic media or hypotonic solution, isotonic solution, and hypertonic solution. The cell will have different effects when it is kept in hypotonic solution, when it is kept in isotonic solution, when it is kept in hypertonic solution. What is hypotonic solution? What is hypotonic solution? If the surrounding medium of the cell, has higher water concentration than inside the cell, then it is called hypotonic solution. Surrounding medium. If the surrounding medium of the cell has higher water concentration than inside the cell, then it is called hypotonic solution. If a cell is placed in hypotonic solution, the cell will swell. If cell is placed in hypotonic solution, then what will happen? The cell will swell. Because the cell will gain water, means there will be the movement of water taking place from the surrounding medium to inside the cell, because surrounding medium is having higher water concentration. So water will move from its region of higher concentration to its region of lower concentration. So in a hypotonic solution, when cell is placed, the cell gains water and cell will swell. Next, hypertonic. Let me just explain hypertonic immediately. Hypertonic solution. Third one. If the surrounding medium of the cell has lower water concentration than inside the cell, then it is called hypertonic solution. Means here in hypotonic solution, the outside medium is very dilute. Very dilute means dissolved substance is less. It is less concentrated or very dilute. Here in hypertonic solution, the surrounding medium is concentrated. It is concentrated. It is not dilute. Hypotonic is dilute. Hypertonic is concentrated. Opposite to it. So then what will happen if a cell is placed in hypertonic solution? If a cell is placed in hypertonic solution, where more water is there now? Inside the cell or outside the cell? Inside the cell more water is there. So the cell will lose water. Means the movement of water will take place from inside the cell to the outside. So the cell will shrink. The cell will shrink. Shrink means it will get reduced in its size because of a loss of water. Okay. Coming to isotonic solution. Isotonic solution. If the surrounding medium of the cell has equal water concentration, it has equal water concentration than inside the cell, then that solution is called iso. Iso means same water concentration. If a cell is placed in isotonic solution, the cell will neither shrink nor swell. The cell will remain same in its size. Why the cell will remain same in its size? Because there will not be any net movement of water either from outside to inside or from inside to outside. If water movement is there from outside to inside, equal amount of water will be moving from inside to outside. So there is no net movement of water that is taking place into the cell. So the cell will remain in the same size when it is kept in isotonic solution. So these are the three types of media. Let us try to understand the isotonic, hypotonic and hypertonic media with two experiments. First are two activities. Take an egg, put it in dilute hydrochloric acid. So what will happen? The egg shell will get dissolved. Shell gets dissolved because the egg shell is made up of calcium carbonate. Now it is called de-shelled egg. De-shelled egg. Keep this de-shelled egg in pure water. When the egg gets de-shelled, it will be still covered with some membrane, that is semi-permeable membrane. Keep in pure water, the egg will swell. Take out this swollen egg and keep it in salt solution. Keep in salt solution. The egg will shrink because the water will be moving from inside the egg to outside. So these two things. Keeping in pure water, it is keeping in hypotonic solution. Keeping in salt solution, it is keeping in hypertonic solution. Right? Okay. And you might have heard of raisins or apricots. Take apricots, few apricots, dried raisins. Or apricots. What will you do? Same experiment. Keep them in water. They will swell because water is hypotonic to them. Take them out and keep them in concentrated solution. Then they will shrink because it is hypertonic to them. Hypertonic. So with this, we can understand that if a cell is placed in hypotonic solution, it will swell due to the gain of water. If a cell is placed in hypertonic solution, it will shrink due to the loss of water. Right? We will discuss the remaining things in the next class. Thank you.